Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Frankly Finance. I'm Gemma Mitchell. We've got Lexi Smith here. So this is episode 3 that we've done so far. And this week we're continuing on from the conversations that we had last week around what money coaching clients expect and really going through all the questions that we both on the intake form, which we want to know about clients before we see them. So it makes sure that they're in the best position, we're seeing the right people, and we know what they want to get out of it. So we went through all of our main questions and we ran out of time on the really juicy ones. So we're going to kick back off with that today and go through some examples of the answers and stuff that we get, and all of the cool stuff that we ask customers before we see them. Just a heads up, it's school holidays, so there's kids in the background. We're both sick, but isn't everybody at this time of year? So hopefully you can laugh along with us as we navigate that. And Lexi's children, well, one of them is under the table currently playing with cords, so we'll see how that goes. But I'll hand it over to Lexi to give us a bit of an update, and then we can jump into those questions that we ran out of time for last week.
It's funny that my 3-year-old assistant just handed me some money. I don't even know where he got it from, but we're all about money in this household. So the question that we got up to was, what do you hope to gain from this meeting? I'm going to put myself on mute quite a lot because it's very hard to control a 3-year-old, as I'm sure most of you understand. But to set the scene for you, Gemma, the response that I got on my client intake form from one particular client was, in terms of what they hope to gain, was to set themselves up with a financial plan and goals. Do you want to chat through that, how you would approach that particular point?
Yeah, okay. So I would say that's a really, really common one. And this is where, as money coaches that have been financial advisors, we would love to just jump in there, but there's a really gray area on what we can and can't do. It should be pretty black and white, but it's just not. So here I would want to be making it really, really clear that yes, we can have a plan for them, but the language is important, because when you see a financial advisor, you get a statement of advice or an advice plan, and that's really specific, and that's a totally different service than what we offer. So again, like we talked about last week, setting the expectation is really important. So I like to say, yeah, you'll see me and you'll get a plan on where to from here and what you need to be doing with your fundamental money management and what little things you can be doing. So it's still a plan, but it's not financial advice. It's not a statement of advice, and it's not a plan in that respect. So with that, I would just be making it really, really clear, which we do. We give information beforehand. Before they book, we've usually had a 15-minute to make sure that they understand that. But yeah, I would be really keen to map out what their goals are and then help them plan to, well, where does that come in? Because yeah, you might have a plan that I want to buy a house, or I want to save for a wedding, or I want to build up my own business, but that might not all be immediate things. So the plan is great that you can then go, right, well, for that goal, what is the roadmap to that? But yeah, I'm really conscious of the language that the clients use, the language we use, and then what the industry is, because these words all overlap but can mean really, really different things. And that's where people can get in trouble with crossing the line with advice, which we're all terrified of doing, right? So language is really, really important. But I think that's a good question, and they will absolutely get a plan from us, but we need to make sure that they're understanding what that plan is. And it's more like a roadmap than an advice plan. Do this, do this, do this. Would you agree?
Yeah, I get that a lot. Like people saying, I need financial advice. And I'm like, their concept of financial advice and my concept are going to be different.
Yeah. Do you get that in reviews as well? Like you get feedback and they're like, thanks so much for the financial advice. And I'm like, eek, I didn't provide financial. But it means totally different things to those people.
Yeah. The other part of this person really wanted to take accountability of budgets. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I love how you're throwing these all to me. So Lexi hates budgets and I love budgets. So, and I know that it's got a really bad, the budget, the word itself is seen with, sacrifice and all these negative things that you have to really sacrifice different things. But I love a budget because a budget is telling you where your money needs to go.
Well, to chime in there, I don't personally budget, and so budgets have a place and they can certainly work for a lot of people, but I'm not one to promote something that I don't personally do myself. So yeah, it's not that I don't ever do them with clients, but it's, you don't come to me and always walk away with a budget, because there's so many other ways to manage money. I've got a little bit of quiet, so I'm going to take advantage of this for a moment. So this client also, so this is still the same client, what they're hoping to gain from these meetings is planning for the future, such as for a house and a wedding. And I find that a lot of the time people know what they need to be doing. They need to earn more and spend less in order to save more. But sometimes that, a bit like with me, with fitness, I know what I should be doing, but because I've got no one to be accountable to, I'm not necessarily going to do that. Learning more about finance was something else that this client wanted to get out of these meetings. Do you want to share a few points about how you educate people along the way, as well as actually being their accountability person or giving them a bit of a plan to move forward?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. People know exactly what they need to be doing, like your personal fitness kind of example. We all know it, but again, there's so much information and there's so many people telling you to do it a different way, whether you're getting fit, you're saving money, whatever it is, there's so much information out there. So I think having a person one-on-one speaking to, like a coach or a financial advisor or a personal trainer, it's really kind of going, well, what's going to work for you, and getting rid of all the noise. So getting rid of all of the other stuff that I know I could be doing, like fitness. You could be intermittent fasting, you could be doing your portions, you could be doing this and that. It's the same with finance. You could have a budget, you could not have a budget, you could do it this way. So talking to somebody that understands your situation is going to help you guide the path that these things will work for you, like pulling out the things of the toolkit that you should be doing. So that's really, really valuable with this process. But yeah, people know what they need to be doing to be saving, but they need that motivation of knowing it's realistic, talking about different ways that they can do it, and just feeling like they have somebody on their side that's like, yep, this is exactly how you can do it. Or sometimes that's really unrealistic. Why don't we look at a different avenue? Like, you're putting so much pressure on yourself, you're setting yourself up to fail. It's kind of like when you're in your own headspace, you can't tell what's a good idea or what's a bad idea, and what's working and what's not. You need someone completely removed to help with that, I think.
And analysis paralysis is very real, and there is so much information out there. It's hard to know, a lot of the times we find conflicting information as well, and it's hard to know which is correct, or maybe they are both correct, but there's more to it.
Oh, and on that, you asked about the education side of it. Like, generally when we see a client, well, I don't take a lot of ongoing clients. It's usually a bit more transactional, like let's just, chat. I don't offer like a program or anything. But education wise, there's only so much you can do in that meeting. So what I'll tend to do is, after an hour with somebody, you've got to feel for their personality. You've got to feel for how they take in information. And if they're really technical, or they just want the really simple, whichever way they're going to go. And I always say to people, do you like books? Do you like podcasts? Do you like doing online courses? And then I'll kind of afterwards go, well, these were the things that you were really interested in. So here are the resources that I think would really gel with you, or the way that this person presents financial information in this book, check that out.
This is something that I think that you will enjoy talking about, given your love of budget. So this is someone different on their client intake form. And that noise you can hear in the background is just all of my Christmas decorations getting taken out of the boxes. So that will be great.
Christmas in July. It's perfect.
Correct. One day early. So how do we create a budget when our income comes in at different times? So that variable income. How would you approach that, Emma?
I love this one. So I have a budget that I always talk to people about, like different kinds, because while I say I love a budget, I don't care what you call it, a cash flow plan, a spending plan. I love a budget because it's like a guidance. It's like bumper rails, but I would never personally or tell anyone else like, oh, I've gone over my budget, so I'm not going to spend that. It's kind of just like a guideline. Like, I don't go to the grocery shop and go, oh, my budget is $200, I'm putting that back. I just mindful of it. And the longer that you have a budget, the more you can be disciplined with it without having to calculate everything. You just know, oh, that doesn't really align with the goal or whatever. But I need a cooler name for it. if anyone wants to help me out. But I have this method on budgeting if you have different income streams or you have inconsistent income. And it's do like a line by line budget, but prioritize the things. So think of like a triangle, and I call it like a waterfall budget because I can't think of anything better. But it's like, so what are the things that have to be paid first? So your housing has to be paid, your debt repayments have to be paid, your food and your transport. They're like the main things, right? And then the next things, what are the next important things to you? Is it you have some direct debits, you have some insurance that needs to be paid, things that could probably be put on hold temporarily, but they're the next important. And then what filters right down the bottom is like, well, I want to save for a holiday. So holiday savings, every time I get paid, like they're right down at the bottom. So as money comes in, it just flows down. And then if there's anything that didn't get paid this month because you didn't work enough, you're self-employed or whatever, you could catch it up next time. But really just the money has trickled down to the most important things first. So that's what I recommend. But I would love, I love adapting budgets and to simpler ways. So if anyone has any other better suggestions, I would love to hear it. But that's what I've found. Like my husband was self-employed most of his career, and that's kind of what we've always done with his money. So say mine was always like salary. Mine would pay these expenses because they were the important. When his came in, that would be like, well, they go to the discretionary ones because they're nice to haves. But if that money doesn't come in, we know that the important ones have got covered.
Awesome. So making sure that if you are on a variable income, that whatever your bare minimum is that you always get, that can cover your, the roof over your head and the food on the table and the bare minimum bills. And then anything on top of that can go towards the more discretionary things like the retail, the eating out. And if your bare minimum income doesn't cover your bills, then maybe actually having a look at other income sources as well.
Yeah. And I think with that, when expenses come in, why I also love a budget is because I never want people to get to a week where they're like, oh, my rates or my insurance came in, so I can't do anything this week because I got $1,000 bill. That shouldn't happen in anyone's household. If you know these bills are coming up every single year because you've written them all down, then instead of waiting for $1,000 having to be paid one week, you divide it by how many times you get paid, and you have a little bank account on the side if it's an offset or whatever, and you put your $10, your $20, whatever it is, so that when that bill comes up, your life doesn't stop. There's a cash buffer there for all of those expenses. And I do that for all of my car insurance. I put a buffer in there of, I think it's like $1,000 for in case I have a car service or whatever. So when all these big ones come out, there's just like a bills account there, and that serves as a really good backup for an emergency too, because if the washing machine or the fridge breaks, I'm like, well, I've got money from the rego and everything just sitting there, and I know it's not due for 6 months, so so I think that helps as well. But no bills, no regular big bills should be a surprise. They're coming every single year, so you should be accounting for them each pay so it doesn't hurt so much when they come in.
And I do have what I call a cash flow plan. So typically a budget is like all of your expenses and how much it is per month, for example. Whereas with this cash flow plan, it maps out the whole year ahead. So working out, well, what's your pay cycle? If it's fortnightly, okay, we're going to have a new column for every single fortnight. And then we're able to put in those bills as well that aren't happening as frequently, or some months you might have 3 gym direct debits, not 2. So this is for when your income and your expenses are very close, like there's not really any surplus. It's very important to make sure that we've got enough income for all of our expenses. And if we map out the year ahead and we can see like 3 different fortnights when we've got a huge deficit that we're going to have to find, maybe a few $1,000s, well, something's got to change then. In terms of the question again, someone's put here that they want to do a basic financial checklist. What would that look like?
Well, I would be confirming with them what their expectation and what that meant to them, because again, the language is so important. But if somebody said that to me with no context, I would think it was a checklist that what is the basic stuff I should be doing to have my finances in order. And that checklist to me would be stuff like, I know where my super is. I know where my bank accounts are. I check that my pay goes in. I check that my super goes in. I check my direct debits. I have a will. Like, I would think that it was stuff like that, but it could be totally different to them. It could be, what do I do each week? What do I do each month? What do I do each year? But yeah, so there's lots of things that it could be. So we do a presentation. Again, I think I stole it off you. And it was like, there's 10 points if you've got all of
that's fine. Thanks, Gemma.
I stole that too. It was so good. And so what it is at the start of her presentations, we'll go rate yourself 1 to 10, on 10 being great, of how good you think you are with your finances. And then on the next slide, it's like, so here's 1 point for each of these things. Now see if the score you gave yourself added up to these things. And it's like, have an emergency fund, be paying extra repayments, like all these different stuff. It's great. But I would think that it was kind of like that.
Yeah, I will actually, to maybe incentivize people to come and listen to us a little bit more. Maybe we can have a look at that next week, and I'll bring that. It's like financially fit checklist, a bit like those, what are those tests called? Is it the beep test, where you have to like run, whatever that was, like that's kind of, I guess, similar.
That was torture. But what did you do for this client that asked that?
That particular one was a very long time ago. I'd have to pull out my notes. But the thing that comes to mind for me was that we'd also be looking at things like, well, are you aware of your super? Do you have a beneficiary on your super? Do you have income protection insurance? Those types of things as well. The things that people don't necessarily come to us for those things, but they're like the housekeeping as well of life admin. And you mentioned will as well earlier.
Yeah, there's that diagram that gets around, and it's like the structure. So I talked about a triangle before of like filtering money, but this is like the foundation. So you build a house on a slab. The foundations is, protecting things. So that's your income, your insurances, and then you build up. Yeah, that would be good to find too. We can post it.
Yeah. So I've got lots and lots and lots of answers to this question over the last couple of years. But someone else here, I don't know if you've had anyone approach you that has been in my budget, but they've said that they wanted to get out of my budget and be able to manage their finances well and pay their bills on time. So I've had 2 instances of this where these people were paying $2,500 a year to be my budget customers. Here we have Santa. See you later, Santa.
That's really expensive. I think people don't realize how expensive like a service like that is. I was shocked when I heard that.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that it's a bad service or anything, but in these particular circumstances, it wasn't right for them. So they were still accumulating debt. So they were getting their allowance, if you like, from my budget. So all their bills got paid. So that's good, getting their allowance. But then there's things that they wanted to get. So they were going to approach like buy now, pay later and payday loans. And they're finding other ways to get extra money.
Yeah, they haven't changed their habits at all that got them in that position.
It was no education as well. So with financial coaching, you get the accountability, but you also get the ongoing education as well. And if something's not quite working, we can pivot and adjust. So yeah, both of those cases have successfully not now using my budget and have really transformed their finances. One of them in particular was forever touching this money that was an inheritance. And so now not only aren't they not touching it, but they're adding back to it. So now they're building that again, which is awesome. I've also got some comments in this question around maternity leave and optimizing Centrelink entitlements while also maximizing our time together as a family. So I have a lot of these conversations in relation to maternity leave and also childcare. So sometimes it is just black and white, it is what it is, but sometimes there are, I guess, strategic ways that you can set yourself up to maximize your payments. So we won't go into that today, but if there's anyone that wants to hear more about that, maybe leave us a comment on the Fanina platform to say that's something you're interested in, because I realise it's not necessarily relevant to everyone.
That's very topical
also,
right now as well, for the subsidies and everything are changing. That was never something that I was really all over, except when I went on maternity leave myself. But I used to do a lot of strategies to maximize Centrelink for retirees, and that was like one of my favorite. But I'm definitely not all over the Centrelink stuff. It was even hard as a financial advisor trying to sort it out for myself when I was going on that leave.
Yeah. I'm even looking at one case at the moment in conjunction with an accountant as well, because, you know, there is that fine line between tax advice and not tax advice. But we're working together, we're able to maximise Centrelink benefits without necessarily having an impact on tax. So in this particular circumstance, this person will be receiving an additional $7,000 in Centrelink payments, which is awesome. And you don't know what you don't know. So it's not until you actually sit down and look at the exact situation. Like, I can't sit here and say, okay, if you are this age earning this amount in this situation, then like this is the answer. It's a bit more complex than that. I've had other people as well want to know whether they can work 4 days a week instead of 5, and what, I guess, if they did work 5 days, what impact that would have in terms of Centrelink and childcare and tax. And so it's about sitting down and doing a bit of scenario planning. So scenario A, you work this amount, this is going to be your tax, this is going to be your Centrelink, this is going to be like your take home pay, like what you're actually after tax and tax and childcare, what you're actually making maybe per hour. Scenario B, okay, slightly different figures because you're only working 4 days. What impact does that have? Okay, what about 3 days? What impact does that have? So yeah, there's a lot that we can still do as financial coaches that isn't financial product advice.
Like a client could go online and do all of this themselves, right? But they just don't know where to start, and they need somebody and it would take them like the amount of time that it would take them to do that compared to us who can do it really quickly all day, every day, and bring up other things like, oh, the knock-on effect you might not have thought about is this, and you might not have thought about this. So there's just so much value in having that conversation with a professional rather than trying to do it yourself and not sure. I think it was, who was it? Somebody was talking on Instagram the other day about people selling investment properties and not realizing the impact it's going to have on their child support and having to pay back like Centrelink and all that stuff. Yeah, so it's just so important because people don't think of the knock-on effects of all of these decisions.
Yeah, and the knock-on effect of that one I was just talking about, the extra Centrelink payments, was that they're also going to be paying less in childcare this year, but then more in childcare next year. But because of the changes to childcare happening in July next month, it was going to mean paying an extra $1,200 childcare next year, versus if they had the income this year, it'd be an extra $2,000 this year. So yeah, slight changes can make a big difference. How long have we got? We've got 5 minutes, so we've got maybe time for a couple more. Someone has said here how we are tracking where we can improve. So how would you approach someone coming to you like, this is my situation, I just don't know how we're tracking, we don't have anything to compare to, and we don't really know how to improve?
Yeah, that's a hard one. And well, one, you need to know what they're trying to achieve. And there's lots of online calculators. So if the simplest scenario here would be they're hoping to track to a certain amount for retirement, because there's so many calculators out there. But yeah, it would just depend what their goal is. So I would probably map out their goals and the time frame and go, right, are you on track for that individual goal? How does retirement look? What are the services you need if that's looking like you're not going to hit that particular goal? Like, is it financial advice around super? Is it maybe just talking to your fund about extra contributions? Or, do we need to adjust your goals? So that's something that we can do, because we're just helping them assess the current position. We're not giving them any advice on a product or how to invest or do anything like that. But I'd be really interested in that conversation regardless, not if, but it would be particularly interesting, like you were saying last week, when it's a couple and then one thinks they're doing better than the other. Yeah. So I think those conversations are really important, even if they think they're doing well or not doing well. It's to still have them so everybody's on the same page.
Yeah. And a lot of the people that I talk to retirement is just like a distant thing that they're not really thinking about. It's more about how are we tracking like right now in this moment, and that doesn't, it might actually translate to retirement, but that's not something on their mind, which is where tracking net worth comes into it as well, because you can't really, with anything in life, compare yourself to other people. You have to compare yourself to, who you were yesterday potentially.
Yeah, there's a
Actually
really good saying that I love, and I can never remember it, but it's pretty much like you can't compare the outcomes or your situation without comparing all of the background, all the resources. So you don't know what education or support or whatever the Joneses or who you're comparing yourself to, and it's irrelevant. Like, you don't know any of the details that got them to where they are. You can only compare against yourself. One of the questions in the, just so we get them covered off, somebody has asked that, back to when we were talking about the checklist, so the ranking out of 10, you find people tend to over or under rank themselves?
Definitely. They think they're, I don't know if this is over or under, they think that they're better than what they are in reality.
I was going to say the opposite. I think I usually see that people go, oh, maybe like a 5 out of 10, but then they've got the emergency fund, they've got all these things on the checklist. And it's the same with money coaching clients. I find a lot of the time I'm like, hey, you're in a great position. Like, I'm really like proud of like what you've done and what you're telling me you're doing. And whereas they're just like, oh, really? Thanks. So I'm always kind of surprised. I think people think that they're worse than they are.
And it really depends on who you are talking to about this. So you might talk to other people, like in business, for example, and ask them like how you think something's going, and it's just based on maybe their personality and their experiences as to how they actually feel, what their mindset is. But quite typically, I think that because money is such a taboo topic and people aren't talking about it much, that the people who are doing really well for themselves, they're not loud about it. And so the people that are doing okay don't realize that there's other people out there that are really taking advantage of opportunities and setting themselves up for the future. So I think that maybe that's where that would stem from. But we will definitely next week, now that we've had a question about it, I will bring along the financially fit quiz, if you like, so we can go through that and anyone listening can actually work out their number, where they feel like they currently sit versus where they maybe actually sit. And the beauty of this thing is that you can then very clearly know what you have to do to move the needle to improve things.
Yeah. It's your roadmap. You should aspire to have all of the things ticked off. And then after you've got all of those basic ones, the foundations, then that's when you move on to the good stuff. And it's the good stuff, but you know what I mean, like the next steps. And this is kind of like the stuff that if I was back seeing a financial advice client, I would want them to have all of that ticked off by the time they came and saw me, So yeah, we should definitely go through that next week.
Okay, well, that brings us to time, but I will be here next week, hopefully a lot more healthy. I'm surprised that I made it today, given my temp yesterday was 39 degrees. All right, well, I will hopefully see you next week.
Bye.
Bye, Gemma.